Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to On Her Side. Today I have my guest with me, Usfa Aijaz Sahiba. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Jazakallah for taking the time to come onto the program today. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, I'm a working mother. After graduating from McMaster University, I went into the field of respiratory therapy, which is where I'm currently working. And I currently reside in the city of Vaughan with my daughter, my husband, and my in-laws.
How old is your daughter?
She just turned 3, alhamdulillah.
Mashallah, mashallah. So they say that money makes the world go round. Do you think it's true?
So when we look at it at a very superficial level, on the surface, it certainly seems like a lot of our stresses are related to day-to-day finances. And sometimes even I find myself wondering that if I didn't have these financial stresses to worry about, then what would I have to worry about? And if we had all the money in the world, then we wouldn't have much to worry about for sure.
That's how it seems. Yeah.
Right? Does the money hold the key to our happiness?
Yeah.
And to find the answer to that, if we look at the lives of people who seem to be coming from money, even celebrities and influencers, do they seem like they're the happiest people on earth? Sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
So it must not be the money that holds the key to our happiness, right?
Yeah.
So to understand then what holds the key to our happiness, Islam has given us two very beautiful concepts, and these are the concepts of taqwa and tawakkul. So taqwa meaning that we're happy and contented with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, and saying alhamdulillah in every situation, regardless of how stressful the situation might be, and then relates to this, the concept of tawakkul, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best planner of all planners. So he certainly has something in his mind that he has planned for us. So having that faith that he has a better future planned for us. By practicing taqwa and tawakkul, I think we can manage to control our own happiness.
So let's just start a step back. Coming into a new marriage, how important is it to have a financial plan? Is it something that we discuss, ahead of time, right after we get married? How do we get to a place in terms of financial planning where both partners are on the same page? And how did it work for you?
These are the questions that can make or break a relationship, right? So whether the girl will be allowed to work after marriage, whether she's expected to work after marriage and she's expected to contribute to the finances, or what the husband's financial situation is like. And then Huzur has obviously instructed us to talk about loans and debts and all those things that can really have a significant impact on the finances after marriage. But then I also strongly believe that it is probably not the wisest idea to discuss all the nitty-gritty details. For the most people, they've never been in this relationship before. So it's really hard to completely plan for something that you've never experienced before. It can actually backfire if you try to plan for every single detail. It's very similar to, for example, like if you plan to have kids, you might get the big questions out of the way, like when and how many, but you don't plan for who's going to change the diapers or who's going to take the kids to school,
Who's
right?
Get up at night.
Exactly, right? And one of the other really important things to consider is that a lot of the people, before stepping into this relationship, they have no idea how to manage finances. They live with their parents, and a lot of times they don't have to pitch in and they don't deal with the day-to-day finances, right? So they have absolutely no clue, and there's certain immaturity before marriage, and there's so much that we learn afterwards, I find. So it's really important to sort of first achieve that maturity that comes with being in this relationship with this person. I was a student when I got married, and my husband was in Pakistan, so he was sponsored, and I remember just knowing that I was marrying a person who was a very responsible person, and he knew that it was his duty to provide for his family. We both had this general understanding that I will probably be working as well in some capacity, of course, knowing that my primary duty lies towards my household. And so that's all that we knew. We didn't plan for a lot of details. We kind of just let it play out. So once he came here, we really did start from scratch, and we built our lives together. That journey is so important to us, and we still look back at it and we talk about it all the time. And we had to bus everywhere and living in a small bachelor unit when we started because we didn't have enough money to even afford a one-bedroom apartment. But that's where we did all the saving. So that's where a lot of core memories were built as well.
Just to take a step back, you mentioned that your husband was in Pakistan and that he had then come over to Canada. So I'm just wondering, oftentimes you hear a lot of concern from parents and families and even girls about how the onus of the financial sort of burden then is foundationally placed on the girl's family when you finalize a match with someone who lives overseas. And then obviously when they're going to come here, they're going to need some time to settle in and then find work and then to start to provide. But in the meantime, it's the girl and her family that are kind of helping, boost that one person. So how did that work in your case? And was that also a fear for you and your family?
I think a lot of families will find themselves relating to this situation. And of course, I think it's really important to understand and be supportive of a person who's coming from overseas and is not only starting this new relationship, which itself is scary enough, but then is also starting their life from scratch, right? Their degrees might not be as useful here. They're truly starting everything from scratch and starting a new life in a new country with a new person. So that's a lot of changes in a single person's life to all happen at the same time. So I think it's really important to understand that this person is sacrificing a lot and to know that they'll probably need a lot of support from us, regardless of who the person is, whether it's the boy or the girl. And yes, initially, I think it really is very important for your village to come together if they can. And this is something I can certainly relate to in my own life. So when my husband came here, he had to work in places that weren't necessarily his field, but he was okay with that. I remember getting so much help from my family, but we also knew what we were heading into and we had managed our expectations, right? So you need to know where you are and be okay with it. And know that maybe the things that you really want in life, they can still happen later. But right now is your time to build together. I was a student and I didn't have time to cook 3 times a day. My mother would send us weekly meals. And that was such a huge thing that she did to support us because I truly sometimes found myself not having enough time to cook all the time. And then even something as simple as doing laundry. We didn't have laundry services where we lived. Even doing something as small as coin laundry would throw a wrench in our monthly budget. So every time we would visit my parents on the weekends, we would pack our bag with laundry and we'd take it over there and come back with a clean bag of clothes. But that support from my parents meant the world to us. But coming back to the point of managing our expectations, we knew that we didn't have the budget to do a lot of extravagant activities. And that's okay. Like if the goal is truly to build your life together and to understand each other and grow as a couple, you don't need to do expensive activities to do that. You can do so by exploring downtown on your foot. And we did rely on a lot of low budget activities, but activities that really allowed us to spend time together.
Yeah.
So it's knowing that the journey is really what's important and it doesn't matter how much money you're spending on that particular aspect of your life.
So I think you mentioned a really key point. You said, to manage your expectations. And I think that's where it all starts. But what does living within your means mean? Because I think it's so subjective. I feel like some people who, to me, they're spending so extravagantly, but yet when you ask them, they think they are truly living within their means. So how do you balance that?
I have a very simple way of knowing that or finding that out. Islam tells us about living our life modestly, and its modesty is not just observed in the way we clothe and the way we talk, but again, also in the way we live, right? Every aspect of our life has to fall under that guidance. So living modestly means that you could have a lot of money, but then again, like knowing what our limits are. So one of the ways that I find is very helpful in knowing whether I'm living within my means is nowadays, all the bank apps have a tracker and they tell you whether you're spending way above your limit or not, right? So that's such a simple way of knowing if the money that's going out is way more than the money that's coming in, then you're certainly not living within your means. It's as simple as that. If you have a lot of debt, if you have a lot of, if your credit card bills are extremely high and you know it's going to take you months, if not years, to pay that back, and you still have all these other financial stresses and financial worries, then you need to sort of come back and talk again with your husband and your family and see like where everything is going wrong and where you're spending too much, and you need to curb that expenditure. Maybe right now is not the time where you can afford to spend like $100 in a single piece of clothing. So understand, and that's where the financial maturity comes in, right? Financial maturity means understanding that right now is not the right time for me to be able to afford that, but inshallah, it'll happen for me later, and being okay with that.
To be happy in where you are right now,
Absolutely.
not to be, whining and complaining and being
Absolutely.
anxiety ridden about achieving that particular goal financially, but to be content and patient, and grateful for what you have right now. When people are planning for their wedding or preparing for a wedding, they'll say, yes, we are going to go out of budget a little bit because things are simply just too expensive these days, and that's just the way it is. And yes, we will go into debt a little bit, but that's okay. We'll pay it off. This is just, you have to live in the moment. You're only going to get married once. You're only going to throw a wedding once. So why not just live a little and spend what you have, maybe what you don't have, borrow a little, and then maybe for the next year or so, it's okay. We'll just make small payments and we'll pay it all off. What do you think about that?
So again, circling back to the Islamic teachings of modesty, and knowing what our limits are when it comes to the expenditure, there's so much more that we could use that same money towards. Yeah. And that could go really a long way in establishing us as a couple or establishing our family's future, right? So spending all that money on one day, and this concept of you only live once, I find a very Western concept that you just sort of throw it all on one day and worry about it later. But really, you're setting yourself up for months, if not years, of this stress. And to live under that stress, that's not a great way.
It's financial slavery.
Exactly.
You just become a slave then.
Absolutely. It's not a good way. It's not a wise way to start your wedding. And you want your weddings to start with the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So you want his blessings to come your way. So why not make those sacrifices towards Jamaat, towards the blessed schemes that Jamaat have started, if you have the means, instead of spending it on a dress or an event, right? Yeah. Those lavish expenditures, they're not going to garner any blessings for you. They're not going to do anything for you. You might just have some clicks and that's about it. Yeah. Really, right? So it's not worth it. Not at all.
I think amongst the youth especially is that they have an image in their mind about a dream kind of lifestyle that they're going to lead. Or they've maybe just seen it in social media, and through social media are kind of precariously living through other people. And so then what happens is, because they want to pursue this life, it almost becomes a necessity for both people to earn and to work full time so that they can have a dual income household, so that they can achieve those dreams and that particular lifestyle.
So I think in terms of dual incomes, just speaking from my personal experience, sometimes, and especially given how harsh the economy is, that's where being a little bit more flexible and having these conversations with your partner comes in. So for example, I live in the city of Vaughan, and I know that the rent can be so high that sometimes one person's income is not enough to pay that rent and the groceries and all the basic necessities of life. And I'm just talking about the basics here right now. So sometimes truly there is a need for a little bit of extra cash flow into the house. But now, having said that, again, looking at our Islamic responsibilities, it's okay to strive for something, for a better future. But while doing that, we have to make sure that we're not neglecting our Islamic responsibilities. So for me, being a woman, my responsibility is my child. And that is the key that I have to focus on first and foremost, and then look at all the other expenditures and all these extra things that I want for myself, right? A lot of my colleagues, they go on vacations all the time. So now I want the exact same thing for myself because their pictures look so good and I want a relaxing vacation for myself. But now I'm letting that consume me. So I'm picking up extra shift, but my child is getting ignored. My home is getting ignored. My responsibilities are getting ignored, and vice versa. Same goes for the husband as well, right? Where they're doing more, where they're working more hours so they can afford a vacation, and they're ignoring their spouses and their children. That's not a wise way to spend your time. Because you might think that that vacation is going to build core memories, but you've ignored so much in the process of achieving that. And a lot of the times we think that vacations like those are really important for us to
revive
exactly,
ourselves.
become
Yeah.
closer to each other. But truly, sometimes I find it's actually quite the opposite, because you go on these vacations where you have an itinerary and you're
It's so
constantly on the
stressful
go.
sometimes.
Exactly. You come back with maybe a lot of pictures, but really not a lot of core memories. So again, understanding what living within your means is all about, having that financial maturity, but also knowing that maybe you can make that happen later in life. Maybe save bit by bit if that's something that you're really passionate about, while keeping in mind what your key responsibilities are and fulfilling those responsibilities towards those people. That's really important.
I think also, as Allah Ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, spend out of what you have, right?
Absolutely.
And also the idea, like you said, for example, that there's just so much inflation these days. The economy is just really just spiraling, and it's so difficult to kind of even survive with basic necessities on a single income, right? But at the same time, when we look at, like you said, the concept of financial sacrifice that we have in Islam, I have found, personal experience where you have a little bit coming in, but you keep up with your financial sacrifices and you keep paying in the way of Allah, keep spending in the way of Allah, and whatever is left may look like very little in a dollar amount, but it is so blessed that in fact it is able to provide for the needs of not just your family, but even more than that. Yeah.
Exactly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly protecting us, and He has promised that He will send blessings our way if we financially contribute and make financial sacrifices in His way. So why not then gather all those blessings and make way for all those blessings to come towards our family? Because that's truly one of the best things that we can do for our children, for our family.
So just switching gears a little bit, do you feel like a lot of times a woman's preference to work, perhaps, is respected, but then there's this expectation almost automatically that she is going to be contributing to the expenses as well? I find, from what I hear just around with people who are going through kind of like the Rishta process right now, is that there's a lot of very black and white sort of expectations now from both sides when it comes to matchmaking about finances.
What Islam expects, the primary responsibility of a woman is to look after the house and to raise the children in the right manner and of the religious upbringing. So that has to be the primary responsibility. But having said that, if the husband and the wife have sort of had this conversation and they're okay amongst themselves for some extra income that is brought in by wife, then that's okay. Having said that, if the husband's expectation is for the wife to be the sole provider of the family and for 100% of her earnings to be coming into the house, then we know Islamically that is not her responsibility. That is the husband's responsibility. And so that also sort of garners bigger discussions about then who is going to be running the house, because it's going to be very unrealistic to expect the wife to earn, to manage the house, to raise the kids. That's just not humanly possible to do it all, right? We have to look at marriage. It's sort of like a group project where two people have been assigned their individual roles and responsibilities. And at the end of the day, there are certain tasks that are shared. And so they have to sort of like check in with each other. And they, at the end of the day, come together and say, okay, have you done this or have you done that? Or I need help with this and I need help with that. And that's where being flexible also comes in. So it's important to also be flexible with the money that you're earning, because if your husband is supporting you in your dreams, at the end of the day, like he says, hey, look, for example, I need winter tires changed and I don't have money right now in my budget to have this done. Can you like support me with this? I absolutely should, because he's supporting me in my dream to work. And I'll give this example because there's sacrifices that are made on both ends, right? So I don't drive. My husband, every single shift that I have, he drives me to work on the weekends or drives me to the subway station and picks me up. So that's so much support that I'm getting from him. So I have to reciprocate, right? Because relationships are all about give and take. You can't just take and then not want to give. And it's really important to understand that if we are going to have very harsh restrictions on our money, then there's going to be restrictions on what we can demand from our husbands as well.
There's so many different situations that come along the way in your life. And to be able to adapt and be flexible is the key to being successful. I mean, I know there's some people who right off the bat will say, no, the two people, they're working full time. They have to split it down the middle, half and half. You pay half of the rent, half of this, half of that. And it doesn't work out because, like you said, in a natural way, I mean, if I take my own example, I'm somebody who has worked. So there was a time when I first got married, I was working full time. And my husband was working full time. And like you said, we were saving what I was earning. And that was by my choice. And if I wanted to spend some of it, I would spend some of it. And then when my daughter was born, I was not working at all. So there were some years where I didn't work. Then COVID hit and I started to work remotely. Now I work remotely, but I don't work full time. So there's a lot of, and as she's growing up, I find like I need to be more available to her. And it's not about just being available to her physically being in the house when she comes from school or goes to school. It's about being there emotionally and psychologically to support your child. And the way that you're going to be able to do that is if you're not exhausted from all of the other things that you have to do. When we were talking offline before this episode, you mentioned that there's a lot of expectations these days from girls and boys probably alike around what the arrangement should be when they're about to get married or when they're getting married. I want you to tell me again what you said.
So one of the trends that I find that is becoming more and more prevalent is for girls to expect, and I think this is a little bit of an unrealistic expectation, but they expect to find somebody who's sort of closer to them in their age bracket and yet is financially so stable that they should be living independently, independent of their parents, independent of any extra income. So they should be able to fully support their partner, their spouse, which is okay. But then they also don't want to manage their expectations, knowing that this person is the sole earner in the family. They also then have this expectation of having a certain lifestyle, the dream lifestyle that we talked about. And so I find that when being a girl who's looking for a rishta, if you go out and you try to find a rishta with so many unrealistic expectations, you're probably going to encounter a lot of heartbreak, and you're going to be disheartened in the process because the expectations are just so unreal that you'll sort of end up looking around and waiting, and it just won't happen because it's given the current financial and economic situation, it's just really hard to find somebody who's closer to you in age. So it's somebody who's in their 20s and yet be so financially stable that not only
they have a house,
they have a house,
fully independent,
exactly,
and they're not living in the joint family.
Right.
So they should live alone in their own house.
Yeah.
And they should be completely financially stable and independent and be young at the same time.
Right. And be able to provide for a certain lifestyle that you've envisioned. Right?
All at the age of 25, 27, 28, which is extremely unrealistic.
Exactly. Because chances are, if they are earning enough to provide for your basic necessities, they might not be able to take you on expensive vacations. Yeah. I also want to add, by the way, I'm not sure why we're so scared now of this concept of building life together. Yeah. We want sort of everything handed to us on a plate. Yeah. And I find that if you, for example, are going to buy a house that is pre-built for you, you're not going to nurture it the same way as when you actually build a house yourself, right? Yeah. So when you build a house brick by brick and you lay each brick for that house yourself along with your partner, the growth that it provides for the both of you, the experience and the nurturing that you're going to, because this house is going to be your baby. So that's how that relationship becomes, right? So when you go into this relationship expecting that everything be provided for you and you don't really want to work towards building this relationship, you're not really going to have a journey, right? And so you're really not going to have a lot of core memories. You're not going to grow together as a couple. So I find that this is something that we really should not be scared of, is having to build our life together. And this is also where the role of parents come in, I find. So a lot of our parents are immigrants, and they had this opportunity to build their life together, not just once, but twice. Once when they got married back home, and then another time when they moved to a different country and they started their life from scratch. So then why be afraid of giving your children the same opportunity? Yeah. I understand that we want the best for our kids, but it's actually important to realize that our kids grow so much and there's so much maturity that comes out of building your life together and embarking on that beautiful journey together.
It's understandable from the parents' perspective where they want their children, their daughters especially, to go into houses and households where there is some stability and security for them. And that's, of course, very natural and understandable. Some of the things that you might be looking for, your criteria, you may be able to get, but a job and money is the kind of thing that can come and go, right? It's not for sure. It's not forever. When I got married, my husband on paper was the perfect match, right? So he was educated, well educated. He had a good job. He had a car. He was living with his parents, but he had actually now made plans to move out into a condo, and everything was great, right? So we got married. I think it wasn't even 12 months later when he lost his job. And then I was working part-time at that time, and I lost my job. We couldn't make the car payments. So we had a new car, and there was insurance for the car and everything. We couldn't do that. So we had to actually return the car. And so now we were left jobless and carless. And eventually, 6 months later, we actually had to sell our townhouse that we had bought at a loss. And so all of our savings went into paying for that loss that we incurred when we had to sell our house in the middle of our mortgage. 1.5 years later, we were both jobless, had no car, and had no house. And then we moved into a very small condo, 1 bedroom, and we restarted our life literally. And we had no savings either because we had lost all of our savings. And so we restarted it. But what we did have was the fear of God. We had the love of God. Yes. And for the sake of his love, we stayed together and we supported one another in looking for work, in trying to support each other emotionally through that time, and uplifting one another. And I remember, we both used to pray, of course, intensely. When you don't have anything, you're praying intensely, but we would never share with one another our worries. So every time we would talk as if there's nothing wrong, because we don't want the other person to worry and we want to uplift them. But yet in our separate spheres, we were both engaged in such intense prayers for God to, alleviate this difficult time. And like you said, bussing everywhere and doing coin laundry. I remember we used to sit on the couch and literally count our change to see if we had enough for a TTC ticket to be able to go to the grocery store or wherever together. And then when we did go to the grocery store, we used to go to like the prepared food section, and we used to get those, like the dessert for two, like prepackaged like tiramisu cake things. We used to get those. And come back and put something on TV and then just share that piece of cake. And we used to be really happy. Yep. We used to think, okay, this is our weekend. This is our celebration. And when you grow together, you stay together, you build together. And like you said, you look back at those memories and the foundation has become so strong because you actually put your blood, sweat, and tears into it.
Absolutely. And don't you find that experiences like those, they teach us to appreciate every little thing that we have in life now so much more. Yeah. So every time now we have a Honda that doesn't have an AC and doesn't have automatic locks. So when summer comes, sure, every now and then we say, oh, I wish this had an AC, but it's always followed by this statement, oh, remember when we used to bus everywhere? Yeah. Alhamdulillah, we have a car.
Wheels. Yeah.
So you're so much more appreciative of every little blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all comes back to taqwa. As you mentioned, when you have taqwa, you are able to fall in line with all of those virtues and principles that Allah Almighty has guided us with, whether it's living simply, whether it's spending in the way of God, caring for family, and loving each other, supporting one another, through it all. Mm-hmm. So that's all the time that we have today. Before we go, any last thoughts?
So I think if there's one thing that I would want everyone to take away from this conversation, other than the fact that, of course, you work together in unity with your husband and you work together on this as if you were working on a group project, the one and most important thing that I'd like to mention is that knowing that if you pay your chandajat on time and if you practice taqwa and tawakkul, doing these three things, it's going to bring so much blessings into your house like we talked about earlier. And you're going to gain so much love from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that because He has promised us that. That there is really nothing else that you're ever going to wish for in your life once you have blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala coming your way. Because Allah has promised that He will protect us once we start spending in His way. So circling back and looking at Islamic teachings for every little concern and question that we have, including all the financial matters, and always remembering to make all those financial sacrifices and contributions first, and then thinking about everything else. That is going to be my message to everyone.
Indeed. Jazakallah for the discussion, Asfa.
Jazakallah wa ahsanul jaza.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Next.